Hey everybody, today I'm going to be going over what to grade, what not to grade, and how you should be protecting your cards when you send them off to get graded. So first things first, we're going to talk about what kind of holders there are for your cards and which ones are the better ones to use if you're going to send these off to grading. So I have the two main types here. We have the top loader on the left and the card saver on the right. Now, if you're going to be sending cards off to be graded, you always want to use a card saver as opposed to a top loader. And the reason for that is whoever is grading your card, especially these days, is going to be going through a lot of cards in any given day. And it's a whole lot easier to pop your card out from a card saver than it is to get your card out of a top loader, which can sometimes make you really press to open and can cause indents on the card itself when they're trying to get it out of its casing. Now, not that you can't get cards out of top loaders, but graders do prefer you to use the card savers as opposed to the top loaders. The top loaders are really good for protecting the cards, but the problem is it is harder to get the cards out without damaging the card, and that's the key point there. Even tiny little indents from trying to pull that card out of the top loader could lower your grade from a 9 to an 8, a 10 to a 9, so on and so forth. Honestly, the indents on the cards really can cost you during grading, so that is definitely something you want to avoid. You want to make this as smooth as possible for whoever's grading your cards, and I'm sure they will appreciate it. And also just keep your card in better condition. Next, I'm going to be telling you what you should be looking for in the card that you're grading to decide whether it's worth the time and the effort to send it off. Now, as you all know, turnaround times for these grading companies vary, but you're looking at least a couple months, if not more. If you're going economy, it's going to take even longer, and quite frankly, you could not see your submission for over half a year, if not a whole year. Keep in mind, when you're deciding what to send, in a year, prices change, and maybe that pristine 10 that you were looking for no longer goes for the same price. So, definitely something to consider while you are looking at how much you want to pay to submit and what you're going to submit. Sometimes it's worth paying extra to get your cards back faster because you'll have a much better idea where the market is for that card. Now, I have a couple examples right here. These are cards that I was going through deciding whether or not to grade. These will all be graded by myself. I, of course, will be transferring these over to Card Savers before I send them out. However, I did want to bring this Regigagas Level X out as an example of what you won't want to send. Now, while this is a very cool card, and to get this mint is definitely very expensive. However, this copy, we're going to be looking at a bunch of whitening on the edges all around here. This is definitely a heavy play card, I would say. You're looking at a bunch of different surface scratches. You can see right there, there's a surface mark. There's some scratching going on, small little indents right there, that little circle. Small details like that will absolutely destroy your card. This, quite frankly, would be lucky to get anything over a 4, I would say, especially with all the deep surface scratches. So this is a great card for your binder, not a card you want to be paying to send off to get graded. This in a 10 would go for a lot of money, but you don't have a chance if your card is looking like that. This is heavy play. Keep that in the binder, sell it as a single, but do not grade anything that is this beat up unless you're going for a PSA 1, in which case you're going to probably have to mess it up even more. Getting a 1 is not as easy as people think. The reason that people pay extra for the PSA 1s is because it's actually quite difficult. At a certain point, if the card is too beat up, they simply will not grade it and they will send it back to you. So you're walking a very fine line between having the card be good enough to get graded but terrible enough to get a 1. So you're walking a fine line there, and honestly, it's a bit subjective, and what will get graded a 1 and what will get sent back changes from grader to grader. So that's another thing you want to consider when you're sending out cards, guys. Always bank on not getting a 10. And if the card is worth sending out when you don't have a 10 on it, then okay, send it. But if you need a 10 for it to be worthwhile, I would recommend you not send that card out to get graded, because there is simply no guarantee on a 10. No matter how good a card looks, it might not 10. It is subjective. You also never know. No matter how carefully you package these things, you are relying on other people to handle your cards with care. Now, obviously, you would hope that they would, but there's no guarantee. So just saying, go off of 995 prices. If that seems worthwhile to you, then send the card. This Mewtwo EX full art, Mega Mewtwo EX full art, I'm sending off. The centering is pretty good. We're a bit right heavy on the back. The front's looking very good. The surface is super clean too. And the reason that I'm sending this one off in particular is there is no whitening whatsoever on these edges. And the XY era had some really big issues with quality control. So to me, this is worth sending off. I think this could grade pretty highly. Grading companies vary as to what they allow. So that's another thing. Depending on who you're going to submit this to, whether it be CGC, SGC, PSA, Beckett, take a look at what they consider to be a 10, because PSA will actually allow this to not be perfectly centered and still have a chance of getting a Gem Min 10. CGC is quite strict on that, Beckett as well. So you just want to make sure you have a good idea of what your grading company looks for if you're going to be sending cards to them. So I'm going to be sending this off. I think this actually does have a chance to get a 10, even though it's not perfectly centered. Beautiful card too. Also, this is just going into my personal collection, not for resale. So that brings up my second point, guys. Understand, why are you grading the card? Is it for yourself, or are you hoping to resell it and make money? Because that is a big factor, and sometimes I don't think people fully take it into consideration. They send off cards that will not make them money if it does not get a 10, and then they wind up paying a bunch of money on grading fees, and they don't make any money back in the process. So definitely something to be considered. These are my Tomy scratch cards, unscratched. I actually purchased a Beckett 8.5 of this exact card right here, the Charmeleon. It got an 8.5 at Beckett, and I was looking at why it got an 8.5 and comparing it to mine to see if I should send it. Because I want, like I said, guys, I want a mint 9 or better if I'm sending this out to get graded. Now, we can take a look here. I'll pull it out of the card saver. So the front, this is how you look at a card. If I'm going to grade, this is how I look. This is what I look for. Now, on the Tomy scratch cards, obviously, finding the centering is a little bit more difficult because, unlike regular cards, it's not the standard border. It does have a different format, but I'll show you what I look for. So you can see here the centering is definitely off. You see how thick that border is versus how thin that border is. Okay, so we're probably not going to get a 10 on this, but the surface is super clean. There's really no scratches at all. Now, this came out of a booster pack, so I would not expect there to be any scratches. Quite frankly, when you're looking at surface, you do need to take it out of the card sleeve, because the card sleeve can sometimes mask little tiny scratches that you'd miss otherwise. However, we could take a look at this. This is pristine on the surface. There are no marks whatsoever, so I'm happy with that. Now, the next thing you want to look at, after you've looked at centering and you've looked at the surface, next thing you want to look at is the edges and the corners. Now, get that in focus here. It's difficult to see. Let me see if I can get a dark background to look at. So you can see there is whitening on that corner. Okay, so there's whitening on that corner. That corner is actually looking very good. That corner has a little bit of white as well. And this last corner has a little bit of whitening right there. Now, these are very small amounts of white. I did not know whether Beckett would give this a 9 or not, but looking at the 8.5, its corners were much, much worse than mine. So I'm taking a bit of a gamble, and I'm going to send it to Beckett because I do believe that this could get a 9. The surface is very nice. Like I said, the centering's off, but I'm not going for a 10. I only need a 9 on this. And that is how I sort of go through whether or not I'm going to send a card. Is you go through those 4 checkpoints. You go through centering, surface, edges, and corners. That checks out. You think you can at least get a 9 or better. It might be worthwhile. Now, some cards you really do need to get a 10 for it to be worth it. I'm thinking of, let me see if I have an example of a card that you would need to 10 on. Okay, something like this. Now the Tomy Scratch Charmeleon is a popular Pokemon. Now this Machoke, not so much. Machoke will not go for as high a price as Charmeleon. This is stuff that you have to do on your own time, guys. Do your research before you send things off to get graded, especially, like I said, if you're planning on selling. Don't get caught unawares. The Machoke, the reason that I am sending this is because the corners are actually perfect. There's really no whitening whatsoever, which for Tomy Scratch cards is extremely rare. So the centering is actually better than the Charmeleons. It still is a little bit left heavy, but it's much better than the Charmeleons, and I believe this could get a 9.5 or a 10. And if you get a 10 on a Tomy Scratch unscratched card, those go for a ton of money. So I'm taking a gamble and I'm going to send that. However, if I had the same amount of whitening I did on the Charmeleon, I would not send this card. It is simply not worth paying the amount of money to grade. By the time I get it back, the card might be worth what I paid just to grade it. It's better to just sell this raw. I could probably sell this raw for $15 to $20 easily and get my money back a lot faster, and I won't have to wait months and months and months only to make the same or even less amount of money once I pay grading fees. I will be going over how to package and ship off your cards in the next video. You do want at least 2 inches between your cards and the edge of whatever container you are shipping out in. That's very important. Never trust the USPS, FedEx, UPS, whoever to handle your packages. You never know who's going to get your package. They could be having a bad day. Always, always, always overdo it on the bubble wrap and make sure that your cards are all in card savers. Obviously, never send them loose or just in card sleeves. You really do need to protect your cards because you might send out a card that is a 10. By the time it gets to CGC, PSA, Beckett, that card might now be an 8.5 or even worse if you don't pack these correctly. So packaging is as important as selecting the cards themselves because there's no point picking out and carefully going over all your cards if you don't pack them correctly and they get to PSA and they're all dinged up. Well, then guess what? You just got an entire submission box of maybe 6s and a 7 here or there, and you've essentially lost all your money. So that's this week's video, guys, about sort of what to look for in the cards that you're going to grade. I hope that you find this useful. And like I said, I'll be back very soon to do a video on how to pack your cards correctly. So a video will be coming on that soon. Have a great rest of your week.